So today I am working on my FBI surveillance van so I can hunt down every person who has ever wronged me. No, not really. I mean my DIY camper van. And the cameras I'm installing are the average Amazon CCTV truck cameras. I paid about $280 and then cried about how fast I'm killing off this van build budget, but smiled knowing the epic footage I'm gonna get of real weirdos at Walmart at 3 a.m. and it'll be just absolutely worth it. And yeah, safety, I guess. Safety is a nice aspect too, I guess, of the cameras. These come with a 10.36-inch touchscreen, DVR recording, Bluetooth, and 4 1080p HD cameras. I was originally planning on installing the cameras all on the matching black roof rack, and that was my plan to keep these stealth, but unfortunately the angle of the side cameras on my roof rack made it so I couldn't see the doors anymore, which was just not worth losing. So my first camera I'll be installing is the rear camera. Luckily, this has the perfect mounting location for stealth, and before anyone comes to crucify me in the comments, Dodge sells cameras to replace this light, so it's not illegal or dangerous what I'm doing. The manufacturer supports it, so please be nice to me, I don't have enough money to pay for therapy. So the first step was to unscrew the light, pull the wire out, and remove the light from the van, which this happens to also be super convenient because I discovered one of my actual brake lights are out and this is the same size, so it's like getting a free replacement. Next, I'm going to remove the side screws in the camera until I can separate the brackets from the camera to make installation easier. I'm using a size 3 little baby Allen wrench, and the circle on the bracket and the hole in the van already match perfectly, which is great. Also, for my own appeasement, I decided to put this hair flip in slow motion. Yep, and that is what van building is all about, after all, hair flips. Anyway, moving on. So because the original side holes do not match up, I need to seal those up, and for that I will be using silicone and beetle tape. This is so that little baby snakes don't crawl in through the holes and strangle me while I sleep. Or water leaks, but mostly the snake thing, honestly. I've already had my van infested by killer carpenter bees once, and I feel no need to upgrade to little tiny baby snakes, because that was absolutely a realistic thing to fear. Next, I am pre-drilling, then using the leftover bolts from my skylight install, and these are size M6. I originally had put just some regular self-tapping screws in, but it was really wobbly and loose, so I removed them in favor of these. So now the bracket is on really strong, and I wanted to add bolts on the back, but the little hole to reach the back of the bolts was just not big enough. However, I'm actually feeling really good about how it's secured now. To finish this up, I'm going to install the camera back onto the bracket by slipping the camera through the hole in the van. The next step is really important, alright? Listen really carefully. You have to slam your knee into your van door, like really hard, full force. Yep, just like that, just like that. And then I sealed up the screw with silicone to make them waterproof, pulled the camera through, and put the grommet in. Then I spent all of this time screwing the camera back into the bracket, and that was just an absolute waste of time because I put it in upside down. So yeah, I had to unscrew it all and then re-screw it back in, which honestly, I make so many mistakes on this project, and this was nothing. It's about to get so much worse. Speaking of which, I forgot to put silicone on the grommet, which I wanted to do as just an extra layer of water protection to give me peace of mind. So I have to unscrew it again, but while I was putting this final layer of silicone on, the bottle exploded out the bottom and got all over me. And oh, by the way, the bottle says to apply with gloves and glasses and to not let it touch your skin because it is a serious hazard, and to rinse anywhere it touched for 15 minutes with water. So I quickly rinsed it off, changed, finished putting up the camera real quick, then I had to go take a shower, and by the time I had finished all of that, it had started to rain, so obviously the universe is just against me on this van build. So while we wait for the rain to stop, I want to talk about the sponsor of today's video. I've been working on the roof a lot lately and never quite been able to get the right angles for my videos. It involves a lot of tripods on boxes and tables. However, at the end of my skylight install, I got the self-flying HOVERAir X1 drone. And I'm no longer stuck with only being able to get angles my tripod can reach, and I don't have to have the complicated learning curve of a drone, and it's even exempt from FAA registration if you're not using it for commercial use. This is because it only weighs 125 grams and is lighter than an iPhone. It has 7 pre-programmed flight paths: follow, orbit, bird's eye, zoom out, and hover. Plus, you get to use the app to make customizable tracks and flight paths to make it match whatever you need most. Plus, through the app, you can make it customizable to different heights and distances up to 15 meters. And it has a total of 15 mile/hour advanced tracking and following, so you can even use this while riding a bike or running. The drone can fold in half and fit easily in your bag or your pocket, and while that makes it small, in the 2 months I've been using this, I have dropped it off my roof a few more times than I like to admit, and it's been totally fine, so I find it's pretty tough. And all you have to do for it to start to record is use the buttons on top to select the flight path you want, then press the larger button to initiate the flight. You can even see the video live right on the app on your phone as you record. But I'm actually not only using this for van build videos, I also use it while out hiking and traveling, including when my mom and I did our road trip across America. It got some really incredible shots that are typically not possible as a solo traveler. One really important thing I want to note though is that because the battery has to be so lightweight, it only lasts 11.5 minutes or about 20 shots. But it does come with 2 batteries, and you can purchase a charging hub to be able to always have one charging intermittently. The storage space is 32 gigabytes with instant download available on the app, and if you want to learn more, you can check out the link in the description. Alright, now back to the install. Day 2, and I no longer am covered in toxic chemicals, and I'm ready to finish this project up today, even if the weather is looking like it's disagreeing. So instead of just throwing up the other cameras at random, I decided to wire everything together first so I could see what the camera would capture to determine the best place to install them. For now, I'll be wiring up the system by the card charger, but eventually I'll be hardwiring it into my electrical system. So to connect the wires to the card charger, I am using this included wire connector that plugs right into the card charger. Then I unscrewed both sides. Because I'm not hardwiring the system into the car, I don't need the blue, green, or gray wires. Those would be used, for example, to attach the cameras to a turn signal. So instead, we're focusing on the red, black, and yellow wires. Starting with the red and yellow wires, which will go into the positive terminal. I'm just twisting them together and then pushing them deeply into the port with the plus sign signifying it is the positive side of the wire connector. Then I just re-screw that in tight and give it a little tug to make sure it's snug. That unintentionally rhymed, and I cringed deeply. Then I will repeat all of that on the other side with the single black wire. And there you go, easy peasy lemon squeezy, that is all of the wiring it takes. Next are the plugs for the cameras, and these are even easier. This will be what connects the cameras to the monitor, and each comes with extension cords, so you have the ability to install each camera wherever you like. And while I finish this up, I want to talk about how many options there are for cameras and how they all kinda suck. And this felt like picking the one that sucked the least. I originally had chosen blink cameras, and I even bought 5 of them, and will actually still be using them in addition to these CCTV cameras, but that's a video for another time. Some of the other options were Simply Safe, Ring, Waze, and I really liked Ring because it included sensors for doors opening and zones for sensors when you're away, but the cameras themselves I really thought were just too big and not enough videos online for me to really know how they work for van life, which is honestly a common theme for all of these options. I liked blink cameras because they had no wiring, they can be set to alarm you with motion activation zones in different sensitivity modes, and you don't need cloud storage, it lets you store data locally. However, if you want to store data through them, it's $10 a month. I hear they can pull a lot of data on your plan, that the motion detection tends to be too sensitive even on the lowest setting, but we'll talk more on this a little later because right now I'm finishing up finding the optimal locations for the cameras. The next camera I'll be installing is the slider door camera, which I decided not to install up front because if I angled it down enough to see the doors, I would lose the ability to see my surroundings, so this way I'm able to have the best of both worlds. So I started by unscrewing the housing on the camera and separating the pieces, then I cleaned the area I wanted to install the camera at. Then I included the foam back piece they included in the kit to the back of the camera mount. And confession, I actually partly picked this location because I had a giant scratch here from using a ladder to get on the roof, and I figured this kinda hit it perfectly. before I did any drilling, I rechecked the location 2 more times because, what am I but a slave to my anxiety? And then I pre-drilled the 5 holes into the van for the 4 screws and 1 opening for the cord. But here's the part I regret. I pre-drilled the first hole, then put the screw in, and pre-drilled the next with the mount now drilled on. I did this to make sure I got the location perfect because I was nervous, but by the end I learned that what I actually was doing was getting the metal pieces stuck under the mount and I couldn't get them out, which will inevitably one day lead to rust. The next mistake I made was that I thought I could drill the hole for the cord just big enough for the cord to fit through, and then I sanded and painted it and then remembered the grommet is sized for the mount, not for the cord, so I had to recut the hole and redo all that work. However, everything was honestly fine in the end. Nothing was messed up too badly, but just to recap what I'm doing here, once the 4 bolts were in, I added the nuts to the back of the bolts. Then I drilled out the hole for the cord. So once it was drilled to the size of the mount, I sanded it, cleaned the area, and added spray paint, which also would have been much easier had I done all of this before screwing in the mount, but whatever, we can't do anything about that now. So then I put the camera cord through the hole, added silicone to the grommet, then I siliconed around the base of the whole camera and wiped off the edges to make the lines look straight. Now I'm reinserting the camera cord through the grommet and the hole in the van. I then replaced the camera and added this Darth Vader looking hood back on top of it and screwed it into place. And then I repeated all of that on the other side of the van. So while I do that, I want to go back and talk about why I chose these cameras. So the first big reason I ultimately decided against blink cameras were I couldn't find any mounting brackets or options that I liked. Another van building YouTuber made a video showing how he mounted his, but it was a lot of zip ties and Velcro. And I just didn't feel comfortable with that in the end, and I also feel like blink cameras look a lot like camper van cameras, and I'm hoping these CCTV ones can help it look more like a work van, but maybe I'm just lying to myself in the end, we'll see. I saw a few people selling 3D printed cases to mount blink cameras, but the angles they had them at were kind of odd and put the blink cameras at such a stark angle that I wouldn't be able to see the doors and the surroundings, and that was really a huge deal to me. And the second big reason I did not go with the blink cameras for these outdoor cameras is that if I'm in the middle of nowhere, that is probably when I want to be using the cameras most, to just sit and look at the cameras. But I think if I'm correct, and I could be wrong, the blink cameras only work with Wi-Fi. They can record locally to a hard drive without Wi-Fi, but they need to connect to a sync module on the same Wi-Fi network through the Blink app, if you want to just sit and watch or check from afar. And in those situations, I'm going to want to be able to see in an instant and not just have a recording of the situation to look at later. I also hated how long each screen took to load and that you could only see one screen at a time. I want to not have to slowly wait for each screen to load as I figure out where and what's going on around me, and unfortunately, it seems like these may also have that, but at least if it does have a slow loading time, I'll be able to see all 4 screens at once, unlike with Blink where I'd have to load one camera at a time. And on a final note, I actually have a few regrets about not going with Blink for these exterior cameras, but we'll talk about that mostly in the end of the video, and I will still be actually using the Blink cameras inside the van. Moving on to the install of the final camera here in the front of the van. I used the screen to find the perfect location where I'd be able to see both the hood and the surrounding area. Before I started any drilling, I pulled the cover down from the cab shelf so I don't accidentally screw through any of that, and now I can access the back of the hole from the inside of the van. Once I pre-drilled the 3 holes, I smoothed the edges, cleaned the area, then painted the bare metal from the inside and the outside. Next, I attached the bracket, this time using washers under the bolts, which I was very happy with, and I did wish I had done this on the back camera as well. I did use the same size bolts I used for the rest of the cameras in size M6 in the shortest length I had in my set. Then I covered the bracket in silicone, reinserted the camera, and screwed it into the base with the Allen key. Then, in a total turn of events, a police officer pulled up and asked me to keep an eye out for a little boy who was lost because I had a good vantage point, so that was an unexpected plot twist for the day.
One, okay?
Gotcha. I have not. I've been up here the whole time. I haven't seen him.
Alright, I figured you're on a high spot, so if you see him, just let us know.
Okay.
Thank you.
I thought I was going to get a noise complaint. Next, I cleaned up the silicone from around the bracket and added some silicone on the inside as well just to be safe. Also, the bolts would not fit right, so just pretend like you don't see that. Ignoring my problems is definitely my best skill. But at least now all 4 cameras are successfully attached to the van. Forever. There is no undoing this, no pressure. Those holes are permanent, so I really hope I like these. So now I get the joy of wiring everything, which actually, I think it's going to be really simple, but I have learned to never say, this is going to be really simple, because then it never is. One of the things I'm going to have to decide is if I want which camera I want to be which channel, because they go like 1, 2, 3, 4 on the screen, and I can plug different ones in, and it tells me like channel 1 right here. Once everything is installed and the van is complete, I'm gonna want to mount this monitor underneath or on the side of my upper cabinets, whichever one ends up looking better. So I'm just gonna wire everything, knowing that I want the hub of wires to reach right here. So something that I want to pay attention to when I wire this up right now is knowing that even though I'm plugging this right now into the anchor just for, temporary power, in the long run, I will be rewiring this into my Red Arc electrical system. So I'm actually going to make sure these wires will reach here, even though I'm just going to plug it into the anchor for now. So each camera came with a way too long extension cord, but I am too scared about splicing and rewiring these wires to make them shorter. If I mess this up, I don't want to risk it. I don't even know if that's really necessary or if it will help in any way, but yeah, these are really just quite long, which is why by the end I actually learned, because of all the extra length, it was way faster to wire all of these up, basically starting at the battery station because of how much extra wire I had left. Because on these first few cameras, I waste so much time pulling all of this wire through. But overall, the process is pretty straightforward. I pick one of the extension cords, plug it into the end, and start feeding that wire through the walls until it reaches near where my electrical system is housed. For these 3 back cameras, I unscrewed the covering on the back corner, then pulled it through the side. I also labeled each of these wires after I had fed them through the wall so I could easily tell which plug goes to which camera later on. That way, once the walls are done, I can tell which wire goes where if I ever need to do any maintenance. I simply just got some electrical tape and then wrote the location on the tape. So now we are on wire 3 of 4, and at this point I have learned it will be easier to wire this up starting at the power station and not at the camera. Then I had to figure out how to feed the wire upwards since I couldn't count on gravity, so I simply tied the new wire to the wire of the last camera, then pulled the wire of the last camera back upwards so that it followed up the van until it had reached where I wanted it to be, then untied it again and plugged it into the camera, then straightened out all of those wires. So once I had wired those 4, I had a giant mess of wire because of how long all those wires were, so I had to sit down and reorganize them and wrap them together. So let this be a lesson for you if you do this as well, to wire the cameras starting at the housing of your electrical system and keep those wires tidy. In the end, I used zip ties to keep the wires wrapped up, then finally I plugged all the cameras into the correct connectors. I then plugged the cameras into my power station and watched nervously as I waited for it to turn on, which was honestly very exciting, and unsurprisingly I had to go back through and switch the directions of the cameras to get them perfectly lined up one last time. This way each camera would show me exactly what I wanted to see. And this step was pretty simple. The 2 sides just needed me to loosen the screws a bit, then rotate the camera, and the front and back cameras I just could freely move around on their own. And now that they're completely put in, the real thing that has me worried is the amount of power it's pulling from these power stations. I'm not sure how much these numbers will change once I have it hardwired into my DC fuse box for my electrical system, but I was definitely thinking they would pull less power. In my Anchor, it pulled an average of 10 watts and says that it could go for about 50 hours. The Blink cameras would have pulled no battery at all from my system, but I would have had to recharge them periodically, so now this is one big thing I am questioning between the 2 of them. So if anyone has any data on how much these cameras usually pull, if this is actually good or not, I would love to know. I will be making a full review on these once the van is finished and I'm really out there using them, and I'll also eventually hook up the Blink cameras in front of this monitor so I can watch all of these cameras from my phone. But I'll get more into that in the review as well. But for now, honestly, I don't know how I feel about these. I was really hoping to have them installed on the roof rack to keep it stealth, but that just didn't end up working out. I also, unfortunately, accidentally bought these in 24 volts, so I'm not sure if I can actually even wire these directly into my 12-volt electrical system. I would love any advice on what to do about that. The back of the box it came in says the cameras are 12-volt, but Amazon says 24-volt, and I'm just worried by wiring them into my DC 12-volt system that I could cause some damage, but I would love any advice on this. I have only just realized this morning, so I'm a little panicky about it, but hopefully we'll figure it out. Thanks for watching, and I hope this was helpful.